depending upon how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night, 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, like, I mean, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say, particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company.
Other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you know that in 1 year you will achieve what they achieve. You will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve. Really liking what you do, whatever area that you get into. Given that, you know, even if you're the best, there's always a chance of failure. So I think it's important that you really like whatever you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. You know, I'd say, and also if you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. I mean, it's something that your mind is drawn to, and if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think. Things were pretty tough in the early going. I didn't have any money. In fact, I had negative money. I had huge student debts. So, in fact, I couldn't afford a place to stay and an office. So I rented an office instead, because I got a cheaper office than I could get a place to stay. And then I just sort of slept on the futon and showered at the YMCA on Page Mill and El Camino. I was in the best shape I've ever been. Go to shower, work out, and you're good to go. If there were two paths that, you know, let's say we had to choose to do one thing or the other, and one wasn't obviously better than the other, then rather than spend a lot of time trying to figure out which one was slightly better, we would just pick one and do it.
If you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing, that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all a company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they are focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating a company.
The reason I came out to Stanford was actually to work on energy storage technologies for electric cars. That summer of '95, I was looking at the internet, and it seemed to me like the internet was going to have a big effect on humanity. So I thought, well, I can either work on electric vehicle technology and do my PhD at Stanford and watch the internet get built, or I could put my studies on hold and try to be part of the internet. And at first I tried to get a job at Netscape because that was the only internet company, and they didn't respond to me. So then I was like, okay, if I can't get a job at the only internet company, then I better try starting something. But I talked to my professor and I said, look, I'm going to try starting a company. It's probably not going to succeed, and if it doesn't succeed, can I come back? And he said, sure, no problem. And so I put my studies on hold and started the company. I mean, we had many, at Tesla we came many times close to bankruptcy. In fact, at the end of 2008, we were only a few days from bankruptcy. It was literally 2 days, or 3 days maybe.
Focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. So, for example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. We put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. I think that's the way to go. So for any given company, just can keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts.
You've got to make sure that whatever you're doing is a great product or service. It has to be really great. And I go back to what I was saying earlier, where if you're a new company, I mean, unless it's like some new industry or new market that, if it's an untapped market, then you have more ability to, the standard is lower for your product or service. But if you're entering anything where there's an existing marketplace against large entrenched competitors, then your product or service needs to be much better than theirs. It can't be a little bit better, because then you put yourself in the shoes of the consumer and they say, why would you buy it as a consumer? You're always going to buy the trusted brand unless there's a big difference. So a lot of times, entrepreneur will come up with something which is only slightly better. And it can't just be slightly better. It's got to be a lot better.
Don't just follow the trend. So you may have heard me say that it's good to think in terms of the physics approach, or first principles, which is, rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine, and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if something really makes sense, or if it's just what everybody else is doing. It's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort. But if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And that framework was developed by physicists to figure out counterintuitive things like quantum mechanics. So it's really a powerful method. Now is the time to take risk. But as you get older, your obligations increase. So and once you have a family, you start taking risk not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it.
People who've been in the rocketry business for decades, who say about you that you don't know what you don't know.
Well, I suppose that's true of anyone. How can anyone know what they don't know?
But when critics say you can't do this, your answer to them is,
we've done it.
You know, there are American heroes who don't like this idea. Neil Armstrong, Gene Cernan have both testified against commercial spaceflight in the way that you're developing it, and I wonder what you think of that.
I was very sad to see that, because those guys are, those guys are heroes of mine, so it's really tough. I wish they would come and visit and see the hardware that we're doing here. And I think that would change their mind.
They inspired you to do this, didn't they?
Yes.
And to see them casting stones in your direction.
It's difficult.
Did you expect them to cheer you on?
Certainly hoping they would.
What are you trying to prove to them?
What I'm trying to do is to make a significant difference in spaceflight and help make spaceflight accessible to almost anyone. And I would hope for as much support in that direction as we.
One thing I really like about you is you are unusually fearless and willing to go in the face of other people telling you something is crazy. And I know a lot of pretty crazy people, you still stand out. Where does that come from, or how do you think about making a decision when everyone tells you this is a crazy idea? Or where do you get the internal strength to do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say I actually think I feel fear quite strongly. So it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of the fear. People shouldn't think, people shouldn't think, well, I feel fear about this and therefore I shouldn't do it. It's normal to feel fear. Like you'd have to do something mentally wrong if you didn't feel fear.
Yeah, actually, something that can be helpful is fatalism, to some degree. If you just accept the probabilities, then that diminishes fear. So, when starting SpaceX, I thought the odds of success were less than 10%, and I just accepted that actually probably I would just lose everything. But that maybe would make some progress if we could just move the ball forward. Even if we died, maybe some other company could pick up the baton and keep moving it forward, so that would still do some good. Yeah, same with Tesla. I thought the odds of a car company succeeding were extremely low.